Wow, episode 3 is a very tough act to follow, and that is a problem that The Last of Us has created for itself. And I'm very curious to see if you feel they managed to overcome it. That's what we're going to discuss first. So as we have that discussion, please share your thoughts down below, because it's fascinating, not just from a fan perspective, but from a content creation perspective. All right, so The Last of Us episode 3 was not only beautifully constructed from an artistic standpoint as storytelling. As I said last week, you could write a paper on The Last of Us episode 3, and we did. But also, it was beautifully done from a promotional standpoint. It absolutely blew up on social media, making Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett overnight sensations. It must be killing HBO that they're not continuing with these two. We're like, we made them stars, and then we got rid of them? I mean, maybe that's kind of what makes the episode so special and beautiful, but I know it's killing a development and promotional exec somewhere. I do wonder if maybe they'll decide to do something with these two guys. There's like a Bill and Frank spinoff, like a prequel or something like that. Because, wow, again, as I said, this thing blew up. HBO sent both of them out to the late night talk shows midweek to really capitalize on episode 3's momentum. There were interviews with them on social media, and they were getting huge view counts across the board. People couldn't get enough Bill and Frank. But they did. Unfortunately, there is only a finite amount of Bill and Frank. And again, maybe that's part of the magic formula here. But I've even had people in casual conversation bring up The Last of Us episode 3, even though they haven't been watching the show. They're like, I hear this episode 3 is something really special. I think maybe I should check it out. I'm like, you should, but it's incredibly sad. Just be prepared. And it's also interesting to me that Offerman and Bartlett were going on the late night shows being like, this is a standalone, so you could just jump into this one episode. But I think the question is, do you then jump out? HBO's like, no, keep watching. But would you? That's what's so interesting. And that was one of my issues. I told you that I thought episode 3 would be a real test for this show, because while it works on its own, how does it work for the show overall? Because think about the people who were turned off by the episode for whatever reason. Will they come back, even though episode 4 goes back to the way things were? But by going back to the way things were all the people who swarmed into this show just for episode 3, will they stick around? I mean, there's no more Bill and Frank, and the story changes. It's not like these are very moving vignettes every week with different cast members and everybody has their moment to shine, right? It goes back to just kind of being more like of a regular zombie show to a degree. As I said, this episode is very gameplay-esque. And then I also think it's much lower energy. It doesn't have a banger moment. And that brings me to the comparison of writing for the binge model, the binge release model, and the weekly release model. I think from a binge perspective, if The Last of Us was binged, episode 4 makes perfect sense. It's a bit of a breather, and it's a bridge between fan favorites Bill and Frank and Henry and Sam, who are brothers. But both of these groups of characters are very popular with fans of the game. So I don't know if it was so smart to wait so long to introduce Henry and Sam, till the very end of this episode, because what are you really giving people to talk about? What's a weekly show is supposed to have water cooler moments, whereas a binge show can think of itself as, a landscape, because you talk about the whole season, right? And I don't think episode 4, I think people will be waiting. They're like, how are you going to top episode 3? And they don't even try to top episode 3. And I guess to some degree that, you might be like, well, I respect their restraint. But can you afford to have restraint when you're trying to hold on to your new audience? And I don't even think they have anything exciting enough. Oh, that's it. You want something banger to hold on to your new audience, but also to say, hey, come back to anyone who might be thinking of leaving. Being like, look what you're missing. But anyone who makes the decision to leave The Last of Us after episode 3, I don't see anything here to entice them to return with episode 4. And, the more time that passes, the harder it'll be to get them to come back. And one complaint that I saw from fans of the game is that Bill's mission, which was cut in order to do this very moving love story, had some of the best, most inventive action of the game. So to remove that mission, you lose those key action sequences. And The Last of Us, the show, doesn't seem to have moved those set pieces to another storyline or replaced them in some fashion. Personally, I would have given viewers an emotional break this week, but I would have wowed them with some action sequences and had that be something they could talk about. And, that would be a way to, again, that's the problem. When I felt episode 3 would be divisive and, didn't really fit with the rest of the show, as beautiful as it is. So again, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. How do you keep your new viewers and how do you lure back the viewers who maybe didn't gel with the episode? How do you do that to make sure that The Last of Us is a huge Game of Thrones style hit, which was the direction it seemed to be going in? And interestingly, they never released final numbers for episode 3. They said that, the initial viewership night of is actually going up, so which is great. But they never said what it ballooned to, on, day one plus day one or day two when you get people, coming to it later. Maybe the headline will be still coming. Maybe they're waiting for an even bigger number. But you would think by Friday, almost a week after the show aired, they would have had some impressive numbers to put up. But I'm just very curious to see how this works. Because I think, again, episode 3 is amazing as a standalone, but what does it mean for the franchise as a whole? I'm very, very curious to see what your thoughts are and how the viewership ends up working out. Now, speaking of the game, episode 4 is a big week for fans who are still here. It's not as big as I think it could have been, but there's still something to be. I think that it rewards fans. There are a few fan favorite moments that are recreated, like Bill's dirty magazine left in his truck. Really, I saw some people who didn't realize that he was a gay character from the game. How did you miss that? I think that it's very clearly indicated. And then also Ellie's book of puns. I love her book of puns. I think volume 2 is hilarious. They should sell this like the Scott Lang book that's coming out, which I also think is very clever. And my favorite pun from the book was, why did the Scarecrow get an award? And I wonder if Joel read the book and cheated or if he actually figured it out on his own. But this was great because he was outstanding in his field. Get it? Outstanding is a word, but the pun is that he was just out there standing in the field like a scarecrow does. Oh, I loved it. I was like, that's genius. What was your favorite pun? The one that made them all laugh at the end, the diarrhea pun. I didn't like that pun. I don't care for that type of humor, but I'm glad it brought them closer together. And of course, fans will be excited about the introduction of Henry and Sam. But wow, once again, they have changed quite a bit, even though we've barely met Henry and Sam. Their setup is incredibly different from the game. Some similarities are that, oh, by the way, one thing that they added was the superhero element for Sam, having him dress up like a superhero. That was not from the game. But when I first saw it, I was like, oh, Sandman just did that. Sandman just had a very similar little boy imagine himself as a superhero to help him get through a traumatic situation. So I was like, it's so weird to see that done almost back to back. In the game, Henry and Sam are trapped in Pittsburgh. I have family in Pittsburgh. I love Pittsburgh. We'll talk a little bit about the driving montage in a moment, which was very Pittsburgh. And then in the game, Pittsburgh had been abandoned by Fedra and was now run by hunters, which is what The Last of Us calls living dangerous humans. And just like they do here, they cross paths with Joel and Ellie hiding out in a tall building. It's an apartment building in the game. Here it's an office building, although in the game, Henry and Sam also hid out in office buildings. 33 floors up. Very clever. I thought that was very good. I loved that. I was like, I love that. It also reminded me of the Ghostbusters sequence, of course. I don't know why they keep making such a big deal about knees. I mean, this is the second time, Joel and back then Tess were complaining about having to, use their knees. And I'm like, I don't know, guys. I think you could just be exhausted. I mean, 33 floors is a lot to walk. All right, but in the game, Henry and Sam, they just want out of the city. That's what's going on. It's become a very dangerous place, and they're just trying to get out. But on the show, they've created a new character, Melanie Lynskey's Kathleen, who's taken over Kansas City, not Pittsburgh. And there's some kind of like conspiracy dust-up going on here with Henry versus Kathleen. In her mind, Henry betrayed her brother, or helped betray him, giving him up to Fedra, and Kathleen claims that Fedra beat her brother to death. I wouldn't believe a word that Kathleen says, by the way, but that's what she believes, so it's important. And she's hell-bent on finding Henry for revenge. I mean, how is Henry currently a threat to her? There's no more Fedra to rat her out to. Is Henry, well, his brother might be dressing up like a lot of superheroes, because I feel like Joel and Ellie were very Batman and Robin kind of in this episode. But like, is Henry like going vigilante style against her organization? I'm very curious to see what they've come up with here, because why does she care? I mean, she's overthrown Fedra. I mean, I guess it's the revenge angle. They also made me feel that maybe she had an emotional connection or some kind of connection to Sam, because she did really dwell on his artwork. But that also could be a directing writing trick just to make sure to establish with the audience, us, that we see that Henry is with a child, that there's a child with Henry. And so that raises the stakes for the situation. You're like, you're hunting kids? By the way, Kathleen's number 2 is Jeffrey Pierce, who played Tommy, did his motion capture, etc. in the games, Joel's brother. His role is limited so far, but so far so good. So far he's doing a pretty good job. I think he's interesting. I noticed him before I realized he was an actor from the game. He's the one who discovers the sinkhole in that bit. You know who he looks like? I forget his name, but I'll put his picture up here. He looks like this guy. But he's the one who they always also play the same kind of roles. But anyway, he's the one who discovers that sinkhole in that basement. Perhaps some hive of infected underground just beneath the surface, looking ready to clearly break through any moment. Talk about a mold problem, by the way. Woo! You know, Kathleen's like, let's just put a pin in this. And he's like, I don't know, Kathleen. But I gotta tell you, by the way, they really should have named her Karen. But anyway, I was like, it would just take you guys a second to pour some gasoline on that and light it on fire and burn those mofos out. Maybe gas wouldn't be as flammable. I thought it was fascinating to learn that gas breaks down over time and therefore becomes less potent and therefore less able to drive a car. I was like, when they were at the gas station, you know, or siphoning off more gas, I was like, does that mean that at a certain point, all of these cars are really going to be unusable because there'll be nothing left to power them? That was fascinating to me. I thought that was really, really fascinating. Electric cars are like, let's do a Last of Us campaign, man. You know, there's a ad campaign if I ever saw one. But, you know, surely they can find some flammable liquid. Go to Home Depot like Bill. Would there be anything left at Home Depot at this point? I am wondering how picked over the world would be. I gotta tell you, it doesn't seem that picked over in some places. You know, like the hotel was pretty good still. I mean, that store by the side of the road last time was picked over. But I don't know. I'm not sure. When they drove by that ambulance on the highway, I was like, you should at least check it out. See, I'm learning. I'm learning how to handle myself in an apocalypse. I'm like, ambulance, let's check. There might be something. It's not that, you know, it doesn't hurt to check. Speaking of that highway, The Last of Us made a lot of money this episode with product placement. Wow, not just Arby's, a cute little nod to the first exchange between Bill and Frank last week, but Sara Lee's and Doritos, ka-ching, they paid for that. They paid for that product placement. I was like, wow, it was so much and so blatant. You rarely see that in shows. You know, you rarely see that. So I thought that was really funny. I guess you see it a little bit like Stranger Things had Eggos, but this was a lot. I thought that was interesting. So finally, we have an episode where front and center are Joel and Ellie. Once again, the natural connection between actors on this show is really impressive, with some great banter between Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey. By the way, I think someone in my family had that Hank Williams cassette because it looked familiar to me. And I think it was cool that they used a real classic cassette tape. It just made it seem more real. I really loved their driving montage because, speaking of family, as I said, I have family in Pittsburgh and I've driven around that area and I've never seen it through an apocalyptic filter before. Like, I've seen New York and Los Angeles and stuff like that, but to see Pittsburgh and that area, it looked just like the areas that I drive through. So I thought that was fascinating because it was very accurate and therefore very jarring to see that. It was some of my favorite visuals. I particularly liked the train. I was like, wow, what happened there? How did that happen? How'd they get off the train? I wish we could have seen that. I think that is a little bit of what this show is missing. It's like a Roland Emmerich movie without any of the Roland Emmerich'ness. Now, Roland Emmerich went too far and ruined his brand. But, you know, he has something there. People do. 2012 is a good movie. And so I think that this show could have used a little bit of that. I know some of you will be like, God, Grace, that just totally flies in the face of the point of this show. But I'm like, don't you want the show to be really successful? I mean, it is, but I think so. Let's see. There's still 5 episodes to go. But I think, the people are like, at one point, we're going to get to Roland Emmerich levels. And so I hope the show delivers on that, even unintentional promise. I loved not just pulling over on the side of the highway to go to sleep, but driving off-road and going for the tree line. Because we're all familiar with the tree line. We all see it as we drive on the highway. And to think that you would have to go hide in it was not only clever, but you could imagine yourself doing it. I thought that was great. The editing also continues to be top-notch. I love when she's like, I'm not tired at all. And then they did a jump cut to her out cold in the front seat. I mean, it was not only funny, but it reminds us that Ellie acts all tough, but she's still a kid. A kid with issues, going all Travis Bickle at the beginning of the episode. I was like, oh yeah, Taxi Driver, copy from the greats, man. Todd Phillips knows what you're talking about. He's like, oh yeah. But Ellie, of course, here is acting like having a gun is very cool, which is a great contrast from the horrors of when she actually uses it, quite incompetently. We'll get to that in a moment. But Ellie clearly has a darker side when you pair her behavior here with how she treated that infected person last episode. She's, there's a darkness there, but society did it to her. She is a child of the apocalypse, which I think is cool. So what did we learn today? We learned never to go into the city during an apocalypse, even on a slight detour, because it ain't going to be slight. Joel was very upset with himself, as he should be. That was a really bad mistake. And he's been doing this for a long time, as they establish in this episode. I thought that was interesting. They established that he and Tess had been almost together as long as Bill and Frank. Although I never felt that between their actors. So Pedro Pascal and Anna Torv, you had some work to do. You are not Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett levels. But there was a great shot, by the way, under that Sara Lee truck, where they had this beautiful stretch of road where everything was just free and clear. But of course, it was just out of reach and they couldn't get to it. That was like the fork in the road gag from Beauty and the Beast. I thought that shot was so great. You were like, it's so close. They tried to save too much time. I would have been like, we're taking the long, long, long way around. But they went into the city, got lost. They noticed that Fedra has abandoned the city in the QZ zone there, and then they promptly fall into a trap, which Joel instantly recognizes because he admits he's been on both sides of traps back when he was running with Tess, and they did some bad things. Ellie even asks him point blank if he's ever killed an innocent person, and he doesn't answer her, which is basically answering her. I'm like, he's too honest. Everybody's like, yeah, that's a yes, Joel. But I have to say, we finally kind of saw him kill an innocent person this episode. So let me explain, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it as well. So in this trap, they lose their truck. Bill would have been so disappointed. I'm like, you didn't even have it for a full episode? When it ran over the nails, I really felt that. When they lost their tires, I was like, this is done for. It was so valuable. I can't believe it. And it's pretty clear that these hunters aren't interested in taking any prisoners, which is weird to me, or recruits. Why not try it the easy way first, as General Quaritch would say? I'll be nice once and then I won't. But why not? What does it cost you to be nice once if you have the drop on these guys? If you have a drop on Joel and Ellie, maybe they want to join your group of wackos. Maybe. You might as well find out. And then you can feel a little bit better about doing what you have to do. Anyway, as Joel is fending them off, I thought it was a pretty good plan the way she hid in that other room through that hole. I was like, this is pretty good. But a young man gets the jump on Joel. But luckily, Ellie has that newfound gun from Bill and Frank's house. I told you, Chekhov says the gun has to go off, and it did. But wow, she aimed so low. I was like, you're going to hit Joel. Luckily, she didn't. But she did such a bad job of shooting that guy, she didn't kill him. And so he was there. It might have been a mortal wound, but, I don't know. Even though he started it, even though that guy started it, he still managed to make me feel bad for him, especially when he started talking about his mom. So Joel tells Ellie, go back in your hole, and he killed that guy with a knife. I think it was his own knife too, by the way, that guy's own knife. I guess he wanted to save the bullet, or his hearing, as we find out. But I gotta tell you, I don't think he needed to kill that guy, and I think I could be pretty tough during the apocalypse, but I didn't see the need. That guy wasn't going to follow them. He certainly was incapacitated. He wouldn't have given the other hunters any more of a lead on Joel and Ellie than they already had. They showed up fast, by the way. And so I just didn't need to see a need to kill that guy. They could have even just knocked him out if they didn't want them to say they went that way. But how could that guy tell where they went? Because they covered their tracks really well. Getting into that side room and then blocking the entrance again. And maybe if they hadn't killed that guy and if he had lived, maybe if they did get caught by the hunters, it would have been like a classic Mercy play. Like, we might have killed all your other friends, but we didn't kill that guy when we had, when things slowed down a little bit. We saved his life. You want to pay back the favor, buddy? I mean, maybe not, but it's better than you killed everybody. I mean, that's kind of hard to come back from that if you get caught. So yeah, I guess Joel is indeed not a good person, or perhaps even better, not a good planner, not a good decision maker, but he's certainly upping his game. Kind of. He's like, I cannot lose another person. Oh, my Yelp rating is going to go way down. I thought it was sweet that he was so worried about them getting discovered in the woods that he stayed up all night to guard Ellie. But here's my other question. Why didn't they take shifts? That to me would have made the most sense. And also, why did they sleep in that truck? They could have even slept in the bed. It was a flatbed truck in the back. They could have slept back there. I mean, I know it's like hard metal, but I mean, how much more comfortable is the ground? Because they couldn't have a fire so as not to attract other humans, but wouldn't animals show up too then? I know some of you have said, why aren't there fungus animals? You want to see that in a future version of the game. And sign me up too. I think that's a good idea. So also, when you're sleeping, are you really going to hear that glass? Especially if someone's sneaking up on you? I mean, I think that was not a very good plan. And of course it didn't work. Even if Joel had perfect hearing, which again they established that he does not, from firing a gun all the time and also potentially from the injury that he has on that side of his head. But I thought the conversation between him and Ellie earlier was really nice. Because, he feels guilty that she had to kill someone, or at least was part of it. And she tells him, it's not my first time, buddy. So instead of talking down to her like he's been doing, he finally treats her more like a team member instead of cargo. Parenting 101, maybe parenting 102, maybe it's slightly advanced. But yeah, kids don't want to feel like they don't have some skin in the game. So I thought that was great. And he gives her some pointers on how to use the gun. As I said, very Batman and Robin. It's also nice to see Ellie drop her tough guy facade, even if just for a moment, when she wiped away her tears. I thought that Bella Ramsey did that very well. She later asks Joel if it's easier to kill when you get older, and he says no. And I feel like, I'm curious what you took from that give and take. I felt like they were trying to say, then what does it matter if it doesn't get any easier? But I was like, no, I think the point is that everyone deserves a childhood. A time of innocence, so that you can fall back on that and at least remember it fondly when you do have to face the harsh realities of life. So I don't really know if there was the right takeaway from that. Anyway, I do appreciate the commentary on how savage humanity can be, especially in large groups, from the gladiator arenas of ancient Rome to Twitter of today. I told you I watched Gladiator during the pandemic, and when everybody was like, yeah, thumbs down, I was like, wow, it's Twitter. Twitter is the same. Oh, thank goodness the stakes aren't as mortal. It's crazy. It's really fun. It's so weird to think about. But anyway, I love that Joel says living humans are even more dangerous than the infected. I mean, that is a very interesting, and I think potentially, true commentary on society. I mean, I don't even say it's potential, but I'm going to say potential to make myself feel better because I'm part of humanity. In this episode, again, we meet Kathleen, a new character not in the games. But to me, it seems like a way to bring in that Abby energy into the first season, Abby being the much debated and very divisive villain of the sequel. And who they could still bring in. This isn't Abby, but I feel it's a way to kind of, because, of course, fans of the game are very familiar with Abby. So I think, it, again, as I said, brings in that Abby energy. I did like her line to that doctor. Her doctor. He says he delivered her. And I like that she said, I'm paraphrasing here, she says, oh, so now you want the violence to stop when you're in the weaker position. And that doctor did not like Kathleen. Because it's not like he was a stool pigeon who would give up whoever he needed to save himself. He just didn't like Kathleen. He gave her up to Fedra, but then when Kathleen had the upper hand, he still protected the side that was against her by not giving up Henry. So I was like, wow, Kathleen, he really hates you. But as much as that doctor did hate her, even if as much as she hated him, even if he couldn't save the man that Joel mortally wounded, I think maybe he could have saved somebody else. I would think having a doctor around would eventually pay off. So I wouldn't have killed him if I were Kathleen. But as I said, she really hated him too, and I think she was just looking for an excuse. I don't know what Fedra was doing, but she certainly doesn't have any due process with her group either. Although I guess maybe the difference is she doesn't even pretend to. She's like, you're not getting a lawyer. But this group, I guess, is like a competent version of the Fireflies, but are they really any better than Fedra? They might even, in my opinion, be worse than Fedra. Again, I don't trust what Kathleen says. It's just, I think it seems to be to be a commentary on, like, let's just say certain groups. So we'll see. I'll be curious to see who you think the certain group is down below. Based on your own position. All right, I think it's like if January 6th took over to some degree. I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there. We also get some backstory on Tommy. And I gotta say, Joel doesn't make him look so good to Ellie. He really kind of talks him down. And you should never talk smack about your siblings to other people. You keep that stuff in the family. I know he and Ellie are getting closer, but still. But he says, Tommy's a joiner. Which, I don't know, Joel seemed to imply it means he's an idiot who picks other idiots to follow. So anyway, he said he joined the military and he fought in the Gulf War. And then after the apocalypse, Marlene, who we met, recruited him for the Fireflies. And then he quit that group. So he's a joiner and a quitter. Oh, man. It's like, just stop talking about me, Joel. And now Joel says Tommy went out to Wyoming, I guess still looking for a greater purpose. And I'm curious to see what he found out there. Let's see. I don't know if I wouldn't really say Joel's doing much better, to be honest with you. That's how Tommy should fire back. And then finally, we do see Henry and Sam at the very last moment of the episode. It's, again, was it too late? Should they have done more? When they get the jump on Joel and Ellie. So next week, we're going to find out what's going on here exactly. And again, this is going to be another surprise. Nobody knows who played the games because this conflict is not from them. And also, I bet that sinkhole is going to likely erupt. There's something in the games about infected hiding underneath the city a little bit. So maybe they're trying to emulate that there. So maybe that kind of comes from the games. But we should be heading into new territory next week. And I hope it's as successful as the Bill and Frank detour. So what did you think of The Last of Us episode 4, both in contrast to episode 3 and to the way things go down in the game? Are you excited for Henry and Sam? What do you think of the changes that have already been made to them? And what do you think of the addition of this new character, Kathleen, played by Melanie Lynskey? Share your thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.